Hey everybody, hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Otherppl show. I'm Brad Listi, and I'm in Los Angeles. It's nice to be with you. Thank you for tuning in today. My guest is Timothy Willis Sanders, author of a new story collection called Modern Massacres.
That's the worst. I thought of canceling this for a couple of times because I was just like...
Of canceling this conversation?
Yeah, canceling this conversation. I'm happy I'm here and I want to be here and I'm enjoying myself and I like you as a person and I'm flattered that you wanted to chat, but it's interesting because like recently I've taken steps to kind of figure all that out and, do things about it. And there's this whole like these like nootropics, like this like ashwagandha, rhodiola, like these like herbal supplements that you can take that have a really powerful effect on your anxiety. Like I'm fucking having small talk with the cashier at grocery stores now. I would never do that before.
That was Timothy Willis Sanders, author of the story collection Modern Massacres, available now from Publishing Genius. We had a great talk, went all over the place, as you can hear. A lot of fun. That conversation is coming up in just a minute. The Otherppl podcast has a free weekly email newsletter. I do a newsletter. It's my newsletter. It's an email newsletter. You can sign up at bradlisti.com or otherppl.com. It's the same newsletter in both places. I always forget to mention that. Today's episode is made possible by Vintage Books, home to bold new voices in literature that push boundaries and expand perspectives. Vintage is proud to offer Bud Smith's new novel, Teenager, named one of NPR's best books of 2022, one of LitHub's most anticipated books of the year. Teenager is electric, says the Atticus Review. It is damaging and dangerous and stunning. It's about two teenagers in love and insane as they journey across the United States in a Bonnie and Clyde-like adventure. That's Teenager by Bud Smith, available now from Vintage. So today's guest, once again, is Timothy Willis Sanders, author of a new story collection called Modern Massacres, which is totally enjoyable. Deceptively simple in its delivery. It's got a lot on its mind. It's got death on its mind. It's got anxiety on its mind. It's got dissolution on its mind. It is a very carefully and astutely observed story collection. It finds a way to strike a balance between these deeper, darker themes and the absurdities of modern existence. Psychological absurdities, physical absurdities, the micro experiences that characterize our day-to-day, juxtaposed against larger concerns, deeper trends, darker forces. And I just love talking with Tim Sanders. We had a great time, and we covered a lot of ground. And I'm excited to share that conversation with you right now. I should say, as a technical matter, that there is a bit of buzzing in the audio, and I apologize for that. I did not hear it on the recording. And I recorded like 3 different ways and checked every single track. For some reason it's there. So excuse the buzzing. It's not there for the whole talk. It will go away eventually. And I don't think it takes anything away from this excellent conversation with Timothy Willis Sanders. Here he is, folks, and his new collection, one more time, is called Modern Massacres.
So I'm in my apartment. It's one of those typical San Francisco, I don't know if they're Victorians, if they're Edwardians, one of the Ians. And it's like I'm on I can see the street.
What part of San Francisco are you in?
I'm in the Lower Haight, so I'm like central San Francisco, dead center of the city. I can go to the top of the hill and see the Golden Gate Bridge. I can see Twin Peaks. I can see just the entire Bay Area, probably about a 2-minute walk from here.
I was there earlier this summer. We took our kids, and every time I go to San Francisco, I'm just like, it's the most beautiful city in the country.
It is. It's beautiful, but it's like got that contrast. There's like, there's shit on the streets. There's people shooting up in weird spots, and it's just it's an interesting city in that way because there's just a ton of natural beauty, but there's just like extreme versions of humanity that that I've just become kind of numb to in this weird way.
Well, wait a minute. Because like I live in Los Angeles, and we have a lot of the same problems, like publicly, that San Francisco has. Like the unhoused people and people who are mentally ill wandering the streets, people with like serious drug problems, like violence, petty theft. All these things have sort of been on the rise and have been complained about. And so when my wife and I took our kids on this road trip to San Francisco this summer, we got there expecting it to be like at least the equivalent of Los Angeles. We'd heard all these stories.
Yeah.
And it was fine. It was fine. I was like, you should come to Los Angeles. I'll show you a problem. Like,
well, no. So let me ask you this. In Los Angeles, at least from my experience, it seems to be more concentrated. Like you don't have unhoused people walking through the wealthier parts of some Beverly Hills or some rich neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Increasingly untrue. Increasingly, it does happen.
Yeah. Okay. I think here is just like it seems like it's like everywhere, even in like wealthier neighborhoods. It's just there's turds on the ground, so it's everywhere.
People just pooping openly in the sidewalks.
Yeah, like that was the whole thing. Like the mayor had a whole campaign about how she was going to clean the shit off the sidewalks. Like it's everywhere here, but I enjoy it here. Like,
despite the human feces everywhere, I love it here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and it's such a fucking like a city in a snow globe. Like it's such an iconic American city and a tourist attraction. And a postcard. It's like living inside of a postcard sometimes. And
you live in the Lower Haight, so you're like in the hippie, like that's like the epicenter of the American hippie counterculture.
Well, that's Upper Haight, but yeah, it's right. It's adjacent. Like I think Janis Joplin's old house is like not too far from here. Like it's just there's all these kinds of cultural things. Like the Castro is just a couple blocks south of here. So, like just all the iconic gay rights history that's here as well. It's just really cool. I just love this city so much. I've been here for 6 years. I think when you last interviewed me, it was in 2015 or 2016, and I was in Austin.
Right. You were in Texas last time.
Yeah, I was in Texas. So this is the first time I've lived in a blue state my entire life. So I'm just really enjoying it.
Why did you move?
I moved for my job. Like my job, I got offered a job out here, and at first I was like, no, I don't want to move to California, especially the Bay Area. Just living in Texas, you just hear all these stories about how expensive it is and how impossible it is to live. But my then girlfriend, now wife, got pretty upset with me and was like, we have to go. So we left, and it was the best decision I ever made. Yeah, Gene and I talk about it a lot, how we just got out of Texas and how awful Texas was. So I don't really miss it. The only thing I miss about Texas is the food. It's like for all the beauty and wonder of California, I can't seem to find a decent plate of barbecue or a good taco to save my life. I'm sure there are good tacos, but the barbecue is just atrocious. But otherwise, I don't really miss Texas at all.
What is the difference? That's an interesting situation for a person to be in, is to be a lifelong, especially in this version of the United States, which is like so polarized or whatever, to be somebody who has spent their entire life in red states and then to move to like the bluest of blue states. Like, What was the experience like?
Well, it was really good because it was, we moved here in October or September of 2016. And I think you'll, remember 2 months after that, Trump was elected. I think 3 weeks after that, we went and saw Rebecca Solnit speak. And, when you go into public spaces in Texas, you're a certain percentage of that, more than half of those folks are probably going to be conservative people. If you go to a sporting event or if you go to, a big box store or any kind of public space, you're going to just encounter conservatives. So for the first time when I went and saw Rebecca Solnit speak, it was, I can't remember the name of the theater. It was, I saw Ta-Nehisi Coates there. Melissa Broder was there, but it was just filled with people who are like me, who think like me in terms of, and have the same politics as me. And, that was really different. Like when people speak and before they speak, they acknowledge that, they're holding this event on stolen land. Like that shit doesn't happen in Texas. I remember I was listening to the radio here and they were talking about the sex ed program in public schools in California. And it was like how they were opening up and talking about teaching kids about, LGBTQ people, to like third graders and how some people were upset about that. But, for the most part, everybody just kind of accepted it as something natural and okay. And that was really shocking. And I don't know, it was really interesting making the transition. And I was just like, I should have done it a long time ago. I don't know what kept me in the South. I think there are things that I still really love about the South that I still really miss. Here's how I'll put the biggest difference. When for people in the South, they will be wonderful and respectful and sweet to you to your face. So individually, like they are really nice people. They hate you when you're in a group. When it's a group of you, that's when they hate you. Here, it's like, they'll be mean to your face or they'll be fake or mean to your face. But as a group, they accept you and will live amongst you. So and that's not just like a white and black thing. That's like, any kind of, marginalized group. That's the approach. So, if you're gay in the South, your family members individually might accept you, but have a problem with the group versus the individual. So it's really interesting. And I think I miss being able to say hi and howdy to people on the street, and like strangers will be nicer to you in the South and in grocery stores and in public spaces individually than they are, I think, out here. I don't know. It's just my opinion, but yeah, it's what my experience has taught me.
So this new collection, Modern Massacres, I read in a sitting, which you can do. It's a short book, it's 100 pages.
Yeah.
Is this flash fiction? Is that would you characterize it as such or no?
I wouldn't call it flash fiction. Some of the stories are just longer. So yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as flash fiction. Flash fiction to me is like a paragraph, like 150, 300 words. This is definitely something more expansive than that, I think.
So it's called Modern Massacres, so I think I had death on my mind when I read it anyway. But each of these stories seems to me to be about a kind of death, or at least some sort of threat of destruction. I don't know. I always try to develop unifying theories of story collections when I read them. I'm like reading there, looking for like the thread or looking for like what the overarching statement is. But I feel like this is a collection that has death on its brain. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. I think if there was like a common theme throughout the book, it is anxiety and, the fear of things falling apart or them falling apart. That's probably the common thread throughout all the stories for sure. Yeah.
And childhood. A lot of these stories are childhood stories.
Yeah. I think that was something I had told Bud Smith I was like writing about being a child or writing from a child's perspective is really, really hard. And
why? Why is it hard?
I don't know. There's a language that I have access to now that I didn't have access to as a kid. So I think, telling a story from a child's perspective or viewing things from a child's perspective is a challenge. I don't know if I did it right or if I pulled it off, but it felt okay to me. And it's just, I think that there is sort of naivete and innocence that you just, it's really difficult to like pin down and capture in terms of the way children see the world overall. Yeah.
And how long did it take you to write this?
So some of the stories, like the first story, Arizona, like that was probably one of the first stories I'd ever written. And I think that had sat on my hard drive for about 15 years. It's funny because there are probably about 150 drafts of that particular story. That story has been told in several different ways, several different styles, and has just evolved. And then there were just some that I had just written specifically for the collection that, I wrote in like 2 months or something. So it just really depends on the individual story. But yeah, the first story, Arizona, as I mentioned, was just a story that I knew I always wanted to tell, but I just could never, ever get it right. And I don't know if I did get it right, but it feels good to have it out in the world at least. So,
how did you know when it was done? If there's 150 different versions, like you just at some point you give up?
No, I think I think it's more about like whenever I it's this interesting question, like, oh, when is something done? And I think whenever I read something, there are two ways that I know it's good. And this goes for like listening to music or just taking in any kind of art. And it's after I leave that thing, does it come up in my brain again? And like once I'm done with the story, like how do I feel? Like if I finish a story and I'm like, okay, now let me go, drink a glass of water or play this video game or like talk to my wife, like do something different, then I don't think the story really succeeded. But if I stop reading a story, I need to take a breath and I need to like sort some things out or if like mix something, then I know it's good. Or if I move on with my day and then something happens in my day and the story comes back into my brain, then I know it's good. And both things were happening when I finished that version of the story versus other versions of the story where, I think I was just, still just trying to understand like what the story was trying to tell me and like how I should tell it. And once I got to a point where I was reading through the story and finishing the story and then like feeling like empty or like, emotional in some way, or like out of breath or something, then I knew that it was ready to go and it was done. And then I would see a bald man and like think about, the character in the story, the uncle in the story. And I'm like, okay, this is something that is sticking in my brain, both immediately after I read it and then, days later when I see someone on the street who might happen to look like someone in the story. And that's usually when I know that it's doing something real and that it's able to go out into the world. Am I satisfied with it? No. Do I sort of, think it's the greatest thing ever? No. But I do know that it's out there in the world and it can walk on its own two legs and it's going to travel and different people are going to interpret it and take it in different ways and, hopefully feel something from it and maybe get a laugh too. So.
Men with bushy mustaches.
Yeah, exactly.
They symbolize something for you. They symbolize a kind of virility and toughness, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So yeah, that's how I know something is done. It's interesting, like with music, I have this whole thing where, if I'm listening to like somebody recommends something, I'll like put it on, and then usually I don't have an impression of the music at first, and my brain will start to wander. But if something in the music like pulls me back to the song, then I'll be like, that's when I know something's like really good, and I'll really just sit down and listen to it. It's always just sort of been my way of sort of the critic inside of me, the filter in terms of what's good and what's bad is whether it appeals to this separate brain of mine.
It's interesting. I have always had bad experiences recommending music to people and having music or anything really recommended to me. It's that thing where like when you really love something and then you want to recommend it to someone and you almost get a little bit too emotional about it or something.
Yeah.
It's almost like a kind of violence. You're like, you need to listen to this.
Brad, do you remember, when you were younger or when we were younger, all your friends were listening to the same record, right?
Yeah.
You had like 2 or 3 friends. You were all listening to the same. You all discovered the same like Led Zeppelin record, or like we're all listening to the same Green Day record, or like whatever. And nowadays, like everybody has their own bubble and like their own set of music that's like perfectly tailored for them.
Right.
And so it's so much more difficult to recommend music now, I feel. And it's always like an active experience. It's always like a deeply emotional experience. Like it's deeply personal. And if somebody doesn't like it, then, it's rough.
The worst thing is when somebody recommends music to you, but then makes you listen to the song in front of them. Like you've got to actually like listen and respond in real time. And I feel pressure. And then conversely, or like, not conversely, but like in a similar way, like recommending a restaurant to somebody and then they go to the restaurant or you take them to the restaurant, even worse. You're like watching them eat. But no, they go to the restaurant and then they have to tell you about it and it never works out. They never love it as much as you do. So it's like, it's not even worth recommending anything, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much out there that everybody finds something for them, and everybody's stuff is super personal now.
Yeah,
so.
But it's also like, why is it so important that other people like shit as much as you do? Like, why do I do that?
Well, you want people to feel the same ecstasy as you,
Maybe.
Like
that's a generous read. Read.
It's especially the people you love, it's like I love you, and that's why I show you things I find beautiful, so yeah.
Bees. I think Arizona's the story with bees in it, right?
Yeah, it's the story with bees.
I related to that. And I also had to laugh a little bit because I'm like, what is it with little kids, little boys in particular? And like this impulse to like go like, oh, there's a hornet's nest. Let me go like shoot things at it. Or like, I had a very bad experience with bees as a kid where my friend and I we were spraying like carpet cleaner into a hive, just like asking for it. And I got swarmed. And I was probably like, in second grade maybe. And I rode my bike home in my little neighborhood in suburban Milwaukee. And I had just like bees inside my T-shirt. They were all over me. And I was just riding home. I remember I walked in the door and my mom just like screamed and like ripped my shirt off. And like a cloud of bees just like,
Oh, God.
Yeah, I got stung like 50 times.
Shit, man. I'm glad you're alive. It's like a My Girl situation.
Yeah, I could have been My Girls. I could have been Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was in first or second grade as well, like we would, my school had this like big field, and literally all we would do is we would wait till a bee landed on like a dandelion or something, and then we would stomp on it, but we'd do it very lightly so that the bee was still alive but incapacitated, like just cruel, sadistic shit. And then we'd put it in our baggies that our sandwiches came in that our moms packed for us. We'd put it in our baggies and then we'd go around and scare the girls with the one-winged, mauled bee inside of the sandwich baggie.
But wait, with the food in there too?
No, empty.
Oh, okay. I was like,
sandwiches, and then we'd go out and hunt bees. So, that was a thing with me and my friends. So I don't know what it is. It's just playing with fire. When I was a kid, like I almost burned down my parents' house playing with matches. I still have scars on my fingers from playing with fire. It was just, the rush of it, the thrill of it, and the danger is just irresistible when you're a kid, So
well, and also like some sort of sense of invincibility. You just don't realize.
Just want to test yourself and see how tough you actually are.
So, how many years have you been writing now?
I'm 42, so about 25 years now, which seems insane.
It does, doesn't it? I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm like, how did all this time go by? I'm wondering what your sense of the literary world is today and like how it's changed versus like when you were younger? Like you were alt-lit, online, writing. Is that a fair assessment? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I guess so. I always bristle a little bit, but I guess it's like it's interesting how accepted that term is now, and it's interesting how things that start as like little internet jokes and 10, 15 years later like are like a big serious thing that people will probably write about in serious ways, and
I just think it's like a shorthand for certain communities, like sub communities or whatever. Like to me, it's just like, oh yeah, like I kind of associate you with a group of writers that I don't know seem to coalesce in the same spaces online.
Yeah, no, it's true. I was definitely involved in that, and like definitely made a lot of good friends. I think in terms of how that's changed, obviously, I think blogging which was so central, it seems, to that whole thing, has kind of
died,
kind of gone away and died, which is really sad, man. Like it was really nice to be able to like count on like 2 or 3 people, that you would just read consistently, and they would be writing just for you. And now that's just not around anymore.
Well, what about Substack? Substack is sort of...
the Substack is just really long form still anyway. I'm talking like, maybe somebody's writing 2 or 3 paragraphs of something, and then, I don't know. It seems like Substack is just way more in depth and, way more time that I want to spend reading something on a screen. But I don't know. I also don't know of any specific Substack writers that I'm like really jazzed about. And maybe that's ignorance on my part.
How do you even search them? This is the thing. Like I know, like I see links to people's Substacks, and occasionally I'll read one and be like, oh, that was good. But like, where's the directory? Like, I don't understand how it works. I haven't spent enough time.
I have no clue. I wouldn't know where to start. I feel as though I've never really gotten a grasp of the internet or understood the internet. I feel like there are people that are just much better at the internet than I am.
You and me both.
And can find their spaces.
But I would think of you as somebody who understood it, like better than I.
I mean, I think I do, like, I think I understand it. I feel like I don't understand it, and that drives me to engage with it more and try to understand it. But I don't know. I feel like when I'm online, I want to do, like, I just want to tell jokes. Like, actually being a serious person online doesn't necessarily appeal to me.
Me neither. Listen, I do not, and I got to be careful here because I don't want to offend anybody. But like people who just consistently, earnestly share their lives online in like a sincere, like, this is, I love this meal I had, and here I am with my husband, and like, here I am at this concert, and I took this walk, and this is the flower that I saw, and I'm just like, I find it, I start to think about that, and I just get physically, like, whole body exhausted. Like, how do people do that all the time? And like with consistency of tone too, like they're always in the same mood online. That's the thing that mystifies me.
Yeah, I think that consistency is something that I don't have. Like, I've always just missed out on that. I admire those people who do that. I think you're right. I'm with you. It's not for me, but those people that can consistently have a consistent voice and just talk about their lives, I think, eventually find good audiences too. But it's just not something for me. I think I'm just really interested in making people laugh and sharing the dumb shit that pops in my brain. And then, like, I think as of late, it's also been like where I've gone to vent, politically as anybody else, but that almost never feels good. And it's probably lost me some really good friends. So I have recently been trying to just like take a deep breath and, not take all that stuff too seriously. But, it's hard when, as you have probably read, when you're as anxious a person as I am.
You don't seem anxious. Are you anxious?
I'm very anxious. I am very neurotic and very anxious. um, and introverted. But I also have this other side of me that's really extroverted and really just open and forward and way braver than the other side of me. I don't know what it is. I've never been able to explain it. But there's just there's some kind of like resilience that I have and exuberance that I have that I've never been quite able to understand after many years of therapy as well. But
do you know what you're anxious about? I mean, is it just like, is it generalized anxiety, or is it like specific things that trigger you?
I think it's both. How can I put this? I think it's just, my upbringing, I think, is just bred a sort of, generalized fear of the world, of other people, of just like doing things. There's like agoraphobia involved. Like it's just a mixture of things, and I can't really describe it. I think it manifests itself most in the political sphere, where I'm worried about my safety as a Black person in the world. So there's just like that anxiety. There's just anxiety about the planet. Yeah, I'm just a super anxious person. I feel like I'm doing a shitty job explaining it, but
well, listen, it's not unmerited. I mean, right? Especially living down in Texas, though really living anywhere, person of color or a person of a marginalized group. I think there's some right to feel anxious, and really, like, we all have a claim on anxiety in this world. Yeah. It's there's a lot to be anxious about, and yet, I guess the idea is to try to find a way to live with it. I get social anxiety in certain circumstances, where I can really just shut down. It has to do with like parent stuff.
Yeah.
Like I got to go to some event and be at a party and like talk. I just I can't do it. I can't do it.
That's the worst. I thought of canceling this for a couple of times, because I was just like,
of canceling this conversation.
Yeah, canceling this conversation. I'm happy I'm here, and I want to be here, and I'm enjoying myself, and I like you as a person, and I'm flattered that you wanted to chat, but it's exhausting, the social situations. It's interesting because like recently I've taken steps to kind of figure all that out and do things about it, and there's this whole like maybe it's this weird like technocratic or like thing to say, but these like nootropics, like this like ashwagandha, rhodiola, like these like herbal supplements, as like this like booming industry right now. And so one of these companies like caught my eye, and I started taking some of these like
Joe Rogan has a company called On It. Have you heard of this company?
I haven't, no, but it is, as painful as it is to admit, it's similar to that stuff, where it's just kind of like, these herbal supplements that you can take that have a really powerful effect on your anxiety. Like I'm fucking having small talk with the cashier at grocery stores now. I would never do that before. Like it's just crazy.
What are you taking? Tell me. I want some of this.
So it's so ashwagandha, I think you can get it at Whole Foods. Ashwagandha, rhodiola rosea, which I think is a bit more powerful, but really just obliterates my anxiety. I never wanted to be on any kind of SSRI or any kind of like,
right.
I didn't want to take any chances there. And so, these herbal supplements are great. Rhodiola is really, really great. You just have to be strategic about how you use it. Like, I can't really do it every day. You just have to be like, okay, I have this stressful, I'm going to this party, so let me take half this, and then you can just have a wonderful time at the party. It's crazy.
No. Okay. So stop for a second. Ashwagandha, how are you dosing yourself?
So yeah, that's also a thing. It's all, all this stuff is unregulated. You have to find out what's right for you. So I have a company that that sends me kind of these like compounds that are designed to like make you feel a certain way, and not sort of build tolerance and help you not have some weird come down, but you can get the just isolated particles on their own. So ashwagandha and rhodiola. And then there's also like lion's mane.
Isn't that a mushroom?
Yeah, total. It's a mushroom, and it'll make you feel great. But when you buy them in a bottle, like for rhodiola, like I had like 500 milligrams, and I took it on the first day, and I was like, holy fucking shit! Like everything was just better, and like yeah.
Okay, so everything's better. Do you get high?
No, I mean there is a euphoric aspect to it. Definitely. But, I think that just like you talked about generalized anxiety, it's just like a voice. It's like, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? That all goes away. And so you are noticing other things more. And when you're noticing other things more, like you're feeling like, oh, wow, this is actually a really great tree, like just shit like that. Like,
that sounds like you're high, dude. I've got to say.
Yes, it does. Like it is a euphoria that comes along with specifically rhodiola. I think with ashwagandha and lion's mane, it's more of like it's more of like a soft Adderall, kind of like focus and like you're more present. But both things really do a great job of getting you out of your head and present, I think.
It's a shame I don't have a sponsorship deal with these companies, because I feel like there are like thousands of listeners right now, like feverishly scribbling down notes.
I just tried not to be too evangelical about it, because I feel like the essential oils person when I talk about it. And like, honestly, like the community around nootropics is kind of douchey right now.
Right.
But I do think that they are really natural remedies to the anxieties that we feel every day and can provide real help. I know people who are, suffer from PTSD, suffer far worse than I do with depression and things that, use herbalists and dose, 1 of 3, 4 aptogenic herbs. And it really helps them. So
listen, I think because I'm in your camp, I like, again, no shade on people who take SSRIs and benefit from them.
Yeah.
But like the way that I'm wired is that I'm worried about side effects. I don't want to take anything. I like natural. I'm basically a raw vegan at this point. Like that's how I am. I just keep, and I'm very, as I have said a million times on this show, I'm extremely susceptible to any kind of new age health trend. So you've like completely. I'm going into this now. I'm buying shit as we speak. I'm online buying ashwagandha. They've just taken all my money. But for people who might want an alternative to corporate pharmaceuticals, let's put it that way. Yeah. These are herbal, natural, not non-chemical. They have chemicals in them, but they're just not like pharmacological.
Yeah, they're either amino acids. My dog's about to bark. They're either like amino acids that are naturally produced by the brain, or they are herbs, or mushrooms, just basically dried out and ground up and thrown in a capsule. So
you know who Paul Stamets is, the mushroom guy. You ever seen that guy? He wears the hat made out of a mushroom. He's like completely Mr. Mushroom.
Maybe I don't know that guy. I'm thinking of that Mycelium documentary that came out a couple.
Yeah, he's the guy with the beard. He's the guy. I mean, he's got a company where he sells all these supplements. He's probably killing it.
Yeah, I do want to say though, like in terms of corporate pharmaceuticals, there are some people who need those to survive. Right. And there have been some incredible miracles that have come out of that. So I feel like there's often this this dangerous dichotomy or false dichotomy that's set up between like pharmaceutical companies and like natural remedies. And the fact is that both have their risks, and all bodies are really different, and people sort of react to different things in different ways. But some people need corporate pharmaceuticals to actually like live in the world and survive. And so
That's right. That's right.
I don't want to undermine that, but or sound like I'm just dogging on that. But in terms of like, the what are those called? The SSRIs and things like that. I think, I'm like already having like suicidal ideation. I'm not going to do anything. Like everything's fine, but when you're anxious, there is just like desire to just like turn it off, and sometimes your brain can just go to those dark places. Again, I'm okay. Please don't text me after you hear this. But I think adding SSRIs and like having to go through a period of like figuring out what's right with you is something so powerful is dangerous. And then I never really had any medical professionals kind of recommend them. I never saw a doctor for anxiety and depression. I saw doctors for ADHD, which I think was served as like the foundation for my anxiety and depression. So I found that when I treated my ADHD, my anxiety and my depression kind of went away. And so that's what led me to kind of these nootropics. They were sold to me as ADHD remedies, natural ADHD remedies. And so that's what I took. And
did a traditional like Western medical doctor point you in the direction of these natural remedies, or is this something you sourced on your own?
No, it was something I sourced on my own, but obviously like, I'm like, are there research papers? Like how many people are in this study? Like, because the FDA doesn't look at them and they are unregulated, and, there isn't a doctor, to your question earlier, there isn't a doctor that's telling you take, 200 milligrams of this. You take 500, you get like, you go crazy, look at a tree and you're like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And then like, maybe I should tone this down. Like, and so you take half the next day and like, you still feel great, but you're not like freaking out or anything, you're not flooding your brain with serotonin. Yeah.
What's your daily take? Like, what do you take on a daily basis?
So the thing with them is that you have to cycle so you can build up a tolerance to them. So I had taken rhodiola for a week, and then I switched to ashwagandha, and then I switched to lion's mane, and then I'm going to switch to rhodiola. So I take about 200 milligrams of rhodiola. I would take 200 milligrams of rhodiola each day. I would then the next week take around 300 to 400 milligrams of ashwagandha, and then next go around I would take about 200 to 300 milligrams of lion's mane. On
a daily basis.
Yeah, on a daily basis.
And then switch it back. So when the lion's mane cycle is done, you go back to the rodeo. Okay.
You can feel it towards like the end of a week. You can just feel like it's not working as well. And so you can feel your body just sort of adapting to it. But then, if you cycle out of it, then you go back to it. It's good. I don't know if there's an herbal supplement that's really, for me, like that's good for day-to-day basis. Now, again, like everybody's body is different. Your brain chemistry is different. You'll start to, if this is your first foray into this world, you'll get on YouTube and you'll start seeing people are actually on there like testing their brain chemistry, understanding like how much dopamine they have at any one time, how much ephedrine they have at one time. Like you can look at how much is in your bloodstream, how much your body is producing, and you can choose these chemicals based on that sort of readout. So you can get really, really deep in it. And so I think for me, it's like I have a lack of dopamine. I don't feel really motivated during the day. I feel, or in the morning. So when I wake up, I'm like, fuck everything. It's not like I want to go back to sleep, but I just don't want to do the day, whatever it is I have to do that day. So usually I have to have coffee, which is an aptogenic herb. I have to have coffee to feel motivated or get over that hump of motivation and wake myself up. But now I just I take herbs. I still drink coffee from time to time, but now I just take herbs. But Brad, it's a journey. You're gonna have to figure out like what is good for you, and it may be a little weird for a sec.
Well, I'm fascinated by it. I'm sitting here drinking my I drink yerba mate.
Yeah.
But it's basically coffee. I mean, it's got xanthines. It's a kind of caffeine.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess some people don't. They just get up and they're just chipper and they attack the day or whatever with nothing. Who the fuck are these people? But most people take they take a cup of coffee. Like, and by the way, this stuff starts to drive me crazy. Is coffee bad? Is drinking mate bad?
I have no idea. I don't think so. I haven't read anything and that suggests it, but who knows? I don't know.
It goes back and forth. Like, you'll read something where it's like coffee's actually good, and you have 70% less chance of dying of cancer of the ass if you drink coffee, and then you'll read something else where it's like coffee's going to give you a heart attack and you're going to die. It's endless. There's never.
All I know is bad. That's all I know.
Smoking is objectively bad.
Or eat too many fried foods.
Yeah. You smoke weed? You live in San Francisco in the Lower Haight.
No, I do. I do partake, and I think that was also something that pushed me into this nootropics world, because it's starting to have a bad effect on me, to be honest. Like the joy in cannabis isn't there, and I don't think that I've necessarily used it in the right way. I don't want to blame cannabis. Because it's helped me out a lot in terms of my anxiety and focus and ability to feel a little bit more comfortable in the world. But I think, at this point, it's just adding to my anxiety. And so I'm like taking just tiny little puffs, at 8 p.m. and then I'm fine.
It's an age thing. I feel like cannabis has become another failure for me. It's like I feel like I failed. Like, I can't be a stoner. I can't do it. I just get stupid, and I wish, and I have this aspiration for some reason to be like the cool stoner, and I'm bad at it. I can't do it. And I don't even drink anymore. I don't even have anything. I'm just like, I'm too fucking old to do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good that you're not drinking. Drinking is alcohol is like literally poison. I have this whole thing where I'm like, men drinking beer is like the ultimate of boy fun and male bonding, but it's just killing us.
Well, and smoking. I mean, all the things that are legal, right? I mean, I guess weed is legal in certain places now, but it's like we make cigarettes and booze legal, and they're both just like straight up poison. And the thing too is like, I mean, listen, I don't begrudge anybody enjoying a couple drinks, but it's like you hang around sober around a bunch of drunk people. It's so annoying.
Yeah, it's really annoying, and it's just kind of like when somebody is that drunk, it's just kind of like what's going on? What are you trying to numb here? Something else is going on. Yeah, it's hard not to come off like a judgmental asshole, but I think I have really found value in getting healthy. And I think at some point, I think some people just find it really sexy and interesting to not be healthy, especially, creatives. I don't know. I just, this has just been maybe it is an age thing, but I've just been like, I just want to take the best care of myself as possible, because
me too. I got too much going on. I can't be hungover. That's the deal. But I can also just to dive into my feelings of failure again, is that there are people, I think, in the world, and you and I sound like we're both not one of them, who are like what I would call sensualists, who they fucking love life. They love to go to a restaurant. They relish their experience of life. They go and they look at art, and they're just like, this painting, and I got none of that. I can't be that level of an enthusiast. I'm like, there's something dead inside of me that is alive inside of them. Do you know who I'm talking about though? They just they love it. They get so excited about it. And I'm like, these are people who would never spend a fraction of the amount of time I have spent thinking about whether or not I should take nootropics or quit smoking weed, or, you know what I'm saying? All this stuff. They just, if it's around, they enjoy it and they relish it and they move on to the next museum or restaurant or whatever it is.
Yeah. You never know what's going on with somebody, though. I feel like those types of people, have hidden lives as well that
That's right.
You might not see.
It's all an act.
Yeah. I think the people I'm most jealous of are people with these 15 and 16 people, really close friend groups. I think those are the people that I'm most jealous of. I got married and I had my two best guy friends there, and like I probably talk to them. They don't live in this city, and I probably talk to them 2 or 3 times a year. But I think I miss sort of being that person that just had like a buddy come over and like you just hang out all day. And like,
this is a epidemic among adults, and I think in particular among adult males.
Yeah.
Women know how to make friends and build community better than men do, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think men are more suspicious of other people than women generally are, paradoxically or ironically, simply because the world is way more unsafe for women, but they seem to be more open and interested in bonding. It's like your wife makes a new friend and she's like, you have to meet her husband, or it's like, I don't know this guy. Like, who the fuck is this guy? Like,
it's exhausting. This is where because I can do this show. I can talk to you or anybody like this one-on-one for an hour or two, and I'll have a blast. I love it. Yeah. But man, I look at friends of mine who have these social lives that literally just considering what they do makes me tired. And I start to get anxious because I'm like, I can't do this. Like the constant schmoozing and breakfasts and like, let's go for a power walk together and like, let's chit chat. And I'm like barely hanging on here. I'm like, how do people have the energy and the space for all this?
Take some ashwagandha. You'll be great.
I'm needed. I think I'm going to be, listen, if this shit works as well as you say, I'm going to become an evangelist. I will be,
I had a friend that he's like he's a guy who you would never in a million years think would read a self-help book, or let alone recommend one. But he recommended one to me, and it was The Men's Guide to Anger or something. I'll send you a link. And I got it, and normally I would never read this type of book. This is kind of like pop psychology kind of books. But because it came from him, I was like, okay, I have to check this out. And they talked about men's ability to make friends, and how men are, and like I was saying earlier, like men are sort of a little more afraid of being vulnerable. Especially being vulnerable around men, especially being vulnerable around men that they don't know. And so it causes this sort of anger, which reinforces the isolation. And so it's a really interesting book and gave me a lot of insight. And so but what it did was it made me sort of be a little bit more open with the men who are my wife's friends' partners. And I found that it was still like, there was still like this brick wall in terms of like, I'd just be like, I'd invite them over. I might not like, there might be part of me like, I just want my day to myself. I don't want this strange guy. I don't know this guy. Like, but I do know that on some level, I want some male companionship in some way. And so, I'll invite, and I'm met with sort of blank stares. Like, men don't know how to deal with that, and it's just kind of like, no, I'm good, man.
Like, right? It doesn't work.
It's really weird, but I'm really sort of just trying to, as I get older, and just grow my own emotional intelligence as like I would any other type of intelligence. And so I'm really just trying to be more open and vulnerable just with the people in my life and with the men in my life, and just say, hey, man, we hung out that one time and I really miss you. Like, right. You would never say that to a man. Women say that shit to themselves all the time. Like, women strange women will compliment each other's fucking pants. Men will like rarely ever do that, and it's so.
I like your pants, Tim. You got great pants. I can't even see them, and I like them. I just want to let you know.
Thank you. So I don't know. It's weird because I thought that I like growing up like elder millennial Gen X cusp kind of thing. Like, you remember that whole thing in the 90s, like men getting in touch with their feminine side, and like we're still like 30 years on from that, and that's still just like maybe it's just for me, but like it still seems like a tough thing.
It's not just for you. And I think too, like, you talk about wanting to be vulnerable, open. You talk about wanting to be funny online. Like the thing that keeps flashing in my brain is like boundary issues. Like if you're somebody who is vulnerable and if you're somebody who is funny online, like those things seem like virtues to me and something to aspire to, right? You can get in trouble with that. People go, God, I just wanted to have small talk with this guy and he's telling me how he actually feels. Or, this guy's online making a joke and like now I'm offended. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems like traps to me. It's like, ugh, like that's where like the negative, cynical side of me comes out. I'm like, it's not even worth it. You try to do this and people
well, you're
like,
worried about the like what other people will think of you. And I think that's the one thing that, I think we're all trying to struggle with is this balance between being ourselves and not being weird and coming off as weird to everyone else. And I think the more we embrace ourselves and, it's really interesting because I talked about, getting healthy, and what they don't tell you about getting healthy is that you lose a lot of unhealthy friends, and you may love these people. Like, right. They may be like really close. You may have like these really solid memories, but because you are kind of growing as a person and, not really interested in them anymore, they'll distance the friendship or the relationship kind of dissolves. And it's like, you're in a relationship with your wife, you have to grow at the same time. If one of you grows at a different pace, there's a lot of friction that comes up in the relationship. And maybe that friction is good and has to happen so that you do grow at the same pace. But if the same thing happens to your friends, but it's also like the flip side of that is that you get a lot of new friends. And so you're navigating a lot of newer relationships as well. And so that's like, another kind of layer. So I don't know. It's just really interesting. What I've noticed over the last 6 years is that I've lost a lot of friends, but I've also either strengthened the bonds that I already had with existing friends, or I've made new friends. Friends that are sort of not at my level, but like on the same journey as I am in life.
Yeah. Well, you speak of like friends that you've lost along the way. There's a story in the book. There are a couple stories in the book that I feel like for me, like things kind of slowed down, and I was like, ooh, the story about your friend Alex. I think it's called, what is it? My Friend Alex Who's Dead.
Yeah.
That story really, Memories of My Friend Alex Who Is Dead. That story really resonated with me, and I have like similar friend losses, and a friend who died in like kind of a similar way, drug related, heroin related, like organized crime possibly related. I don't know how true it is, but it seemed pretty close to the bone, that story.
You can it's based on my friend Brian Van Ash, and you can go on Reddit right now, and there's a big like Unsolved Mysteries Reddit, and there's a big Reddit thread about him and his wife. His wife is in the permanent collection at the MoMA. Like, she's like an established artist. He was like probably one of the smartest people I had ever met, and he was the one that like introduced me to the counterculture and like introduced me to literature. And like I still have one of his books. The first book he ever gave me was the Journals of Allen Ginsberg. And so, it's Ginsberg's journals where he's, talking about sleeping with his husband or sleeping with his boyfriend, his partner. And like, I'm a 16-year-old kid reading this in Midwest City, Oklahoma, and it's fucking blowing my mind. And like, and so, he was the one I credit him with sort of expanding my own consciousness and introducing me to the world of art, really. And he was just a incredibly wild spirit, and just sort of lived on the edge of life at all times, and including with drugs, and was the first person I ever saw shoot up. And I think I call it out in the story. Like, I wonder if at some point I had joined him, like how different my life would have been. But sure, yeah. I just never, for some reason, like that other part of me is like, nah, dude, like this is how Kurt Cobain died. Are you crazy? Like,
yeah, Plus, like, that's just the thing. It never would have, put a needle in my arm. No thanks. Like, that doesn't sound like fun to me.
Kurt Cobain didn't die that way, but it definitely had a negative effect on his life. So yeah.
I always knew where the line was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't willing to go past a certain point with that stuff. And I'm wondering, there's a scene in the story where you're together on 9/11, or the character or the narrator and the Alex character are together on 9/11. How true is that?
It's really true. So the thing about Brian is that he, we, like, the first time I did MDMA, I had this, like, it was really, like, it felt really good at first, but I did it with Brian, or Alex in the story, and he didn't like it. He was like, this isn't something it's like, I feel dead inside. I don't like how this makes you feel. I want to go home and go to bed. And so I was crashing with him, and this is like it was like actually 2 weeks after 9/11, but it was still just like plastered all over the news. And so we get to his house, and he makes this pallet on this hardwood floor. It's like a sheet. And I'm like, I'm like, my teeth are chattering. I'm like rolling like crazy. And he lays down on his couch, passes out, turns on the TV, turns on CNN, passes out on his couch. And I'm just like on the ground as the towers are coming down, and I'm like on drugs. And I'm just like, oh, God. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. But yeah, one of several memories that I have of the time I spent with him. What's funny is that one of his best friends, I was never really close with when I was in high school, but I've since become really close with. And I got an opportunity to show him the story, and he was like, "Man, you really got Brian." And I really wanted, a version of Brian to sort of live on and tell that story. So that story is like something that's like really just like an homage to the person who introduced me to art. But his life was really, really tragic, and he died in this really, really, really brutal way. But he still found the love of his life, and who is this incredible artist. So I don't know. It's just really a fascinating story, and I'm glad I got it down. And
yeah, it's a beautiful story, and I'll let readers, listeners can read it to find out the details. That seems like a good incentive for them to pick up the book. And to just sort of dive a little bit more into the collection and its theme, we've been talking about anxiety, dread, death, menace, all these things that sort of loom in the culture, and, things that we have to reckon with as human beings, psychologically and otherwise. And I want to read a section that I loved, and I got to remember what story it's from. It might be from the title story, Modern Massacres.
Yeah.
But I'll read this section, and just bear with me here.
All right. Yeah, this is interesting. I've never heard anybody else read it.
Yeah, I'm going to read it because I just loved it, and I sort of marked it with my pen. Alex watches a couple in matching I haven't had my coffee yoga shirts, and the word coffee's crossed out. So Alex watches a couple in matching I haven't had my coffee yoga shirts struggle to control the clumsy labradoodles. He thinks about how he would confess to anything the secret police wanted. He senses himself worrying that, for the crime of slurping his drink, the woman in the yoga coffee naps shirt, this is a different woman, would report him to the secret police. You can't control what people think of you. Alex senses the man in the tan suit staring more intensely now. He thinks, when genocide happens, there is always someone, somewhere, slurping expensive coffee. He packs up his book and leaves the coffee shop. He looks down the street, where he sees more people carrying yoga mats and wearing yoga pants. They all seem to be marching in step with each other, like a yoga army, invading the neighborhood, raising the price of coffee beans, and driving ethnic minorities from their homes. All right. So this, I think, is a brilliant juxtaposition of like the ordinary, the bougie, and the tyrannical, and like the real menace, and it brings class and cultural differences into focus. It's doing a lot of things at once, I guess, is what I'm saying. But I found it so recognizable, maybe as a fellow Californian.
Yeah.
Because I feel exactly the same level of menace inside these things, which at the surface level are harmless, you would think, or are even, they even involve wellness. Like yoga is all about wellness. And yet it's like, it's evil. And these fucking labradoodles that I see everywhere in these bougie neighborhoods. I bitch about this to my friend all the time. I'm like, dude, there's another doodle. There's a doodle. And I've got like this mangy mutt that I adopted, that was like born in the streets of Tijuana. And I'm like, I kind of feel superior about it. I'm like, look at you with your $3,000 designer dog, which just like attacked my dog outside the yoga studio or whatever it is. But, I was just glad to see somebody, I don't know, I recognized myself in this passage in particular, and I want to hear you talk about it.
Oh man, I'm so glad you asked me about this because, I particularly love that story because I think, one, it encapsulates just class anxiety, racial anxiety, political anxiety, just like I wanted to just kind of distill it all down and get it into one story. And it, you read the story, like not a lot happens. Like it's just about a guy who walks to a coffee shop, does a little reading, and then like walks back. Really, there's not much happens actually in the story, and most of the drama takes place within the character's anxiety and the character's imagination. And I think a lot of I'm a big history buff, specifically Russian history, like Eastern European history. I've read probably 5 or 6 biographies of Stalin.
Why?
This is what I absolutely could not tell you why, literally Caucasian people like why they fascinate me so much. Well, I'll tell you this, like the first writers to have a big impact on me were the Tolstoys, were the Dostoevskys. And so I really wanted to understand the environment with which they came about. And so that led me to Russian history. Stalin, I think I discovered him in college, but he seemed to me like to be this person who represented the extreme of sort of left-wing ideology. And as a leftist in college who had communist friends, I really wanted to understand what I was really an advocate of and what I was really like, what I really believed in. And so it became fascinating to me that he as a person, belonged to this ideology that was all about representing the worker, representing the small man against the tyrannical rich man, and class warfare and all that stuff. But it ended up sort of going all the way back and being really fascistic. So anyway, I understand totalitarian regimes have always been really of deep interest to me. My dad fought in the first Gulf War. I've read a lot about Saddam Hussein, his regime, the idea of this one man who can sort of mystify or sort of entrance an entire nation and get them to hang pictures of him in their houses and then kill anybody who disagrees is really interesting to me and fascinating about how all that comes about. So I've been reading about that stuff for like 20 years, but it never found its way into my work. Like I always kind of separated it, and I know a lot about these events, and I just have all this information, but I've never been able to kind of distill it in. And what I've found is that in most of these societies, if you look at like the Weimar government before Hitler took over, if you look at the 6 months between February of 1917 and October of 1917 before the Bolsheviks took over in Russia, you had these kinds of like periods in time where they were like these progressive utopias. Like in the Weimar government, that's where the first studies around transgender people started to be written, the first scholarly articles. Like it was a very open and accepting society, a really progressive society, and then it swung in a totally different direction. And so I think now with the rise in 2016, with the rise of Trump, and you see all these authoritarian aspects within the Republican Party, it just has generated a ton of anxiety. And all of a sudden, all of that reading that I had done up until that point.
I was going to say, this must have been prepared you. It must have prepared you so well for 16 and what came after.
Well, it became such a reality. Like, it could definitely happen here. You could have the Oath Keepers hit food supplies in the middle of California. You have the whole swath of the middle of all of middle of California is filled with Nazis who have to pay like Gavin Newsom taxes, and so there is this reactionary element that's within the United States that got really close to total power. And I think that's really terrifying. And I think we could have the same types of situations here, especially as we sort of get further out and our memories of the war, World War I and World War II, become more distant. We lose all that history. We start to not really understand the Holocaust, not really understand what actually happened in Soviet Russia. And so the book is like or the story itself is like a distillation of all that anxiety. And,
and just so people are following, the story that we're talking about is the title story, Modern Massacres.
Yeah. Modern Massacres. That story is just, it talks about how easily genocide and mass murder, modern massacres can come to the United States, and how regular people in Russia today, regular people in Hungary today support fascism. Like, they support a one-party rule. They support the disappearing of ethnic minorities. They may be ignorant to it. They may be brainwashed by state propaganda. But on some level, I think there is an acceptance, and, there is sort of, you often hear about with the Stasi, in these totalitarian regimes, people snitching. So that passage that you read, like, in Stalin's Russia, if you wanted to take revenge on your neighbor, you could report them for, saying, hey, they said something against, dear leader. And the secret police would snatch them up, would disappear them. So it's just like that particular story is just all of this reading that I had done just casually and from just as like a hobbyist interest, trying to get that into my work. And, I've flirted with this idea of doing like historical fiction, and I don't know if I can do that. I'm not a researcher per se.
Well, but you kind of are. You're reading all these books, about history and stuff. That would qualify.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I don't know how much of it is actually falling out of my brain, though. I read books that, like, what is the percentage of the grain supply in the Ukraine coming out of the Ukraine in 1936? Like, I might read about that, but I don't actually I don't actually know what that percentage is. So, not that you actually need that for historical fiction, and maybe one day I actually will do some historical fiction, but I think you need a little bit more intellectual rigor than I'm willing to apply.
It's a big lift. It's a big lift.
Yeah, it's a big lift. But I can tell my own stories and how these kinds of books. It's also, I think if you read too much of that shit, I have a book right now that I'm reading. It's Anna Applebaum. It's Gulag.
Oh,
it's
right.
about gulags. That shit is like really, really heavy and can take you to a really dark place. So the book is like, about how that stuff impacts your daily life and increases your anxiety, the closer you get to that
I was going to say, no wonder you're taking nootropics. You're reading about the gulag.
Exactly. And I read about the Holocaust. I feel like it's really important to stay in touch with the extremes and the evils of human nature, just as a moral, political person.
That's right.
So anyway, yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to go buy some nootropics. I'm going to read about Stalin. What else am I going to do? I don't know, but I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad you didn't cancel. I'm glad
I didn't cancel either. I would have never done it. I just, illustrates my social anxiety overall. So yeah, but I'm really glad. This conversation, I think, was much more robust, and I feel much more comfortable than our last chat.
I don't remember. I'm trying to remember. I think we talked about.
It was good. We talked about I thought we were going to talk about the book, but we got really personal, and maybe that was my ignorance with the show, because you do that with all your guests. But at the time, I was like, oh, now I'm talking about my dad.
Well, listen, I will confess, I have gone back and forth. The show is more about the book in its current iterations than it maybe was in its earliest days.
Yeah.
But the conceit from the beginning was that it would be about the author and the author's life, and it would be personal and conversational and improvisational. And we would just talk about whatever came up. And I think maybe nowadays, as podcasts have kind of proliferated and there's more of them and the quality has gone up, it's like, I guess people want, I feel, and I'm getting high profile authors on, and it's like, I got to give them the NPR,
Well, yeah, I thought that you were going to Michael Silverblatt me. I was like, he's going to ask me a bunch of deep questions about this book. And I'm like, look, man, I was just trying to have some fun on the plane.
But the thing is that I can't be better than Michael Silverblatt at being Michael Silverblatt. That already exists. That already exists. So I guess I'm confessing my struggle about the format of the show. I kind of think it's better and more interesting as a personal matter when a show is just sort of off the rails and people are talking about life. But it takes two to tango. Sometimes it can fall flat if I'm doing a shitty job that day, or if the person I'm talking with just is like, listen, I just want to talk about my poetry.
Poets typically do.
I don't know. But hey, listen, no, I've had conversations with poets that go off the rails beautifully. And I think where I'm now is I think I'm sort of yo-yoing back to off the rails. I think I'm just off the rails, and that's who I am. So I appreciate you in both episodes that we've now done. I appreciate you being willing to go off the rails with me.
So I will say this, it's crazy how many people, how many just sort of younger people write me and reference that podcast, and how it helped them in some way. So it is an interesting. It's interesting how it's lived on and has gone on. So I just mentioned that because I thought it was just a really great thing to do, and credit to you. So
I appreciate it. I'm always glad whenever an episode is sticky that way for listeners, because that's the hope. And then it's also, I think if people feel a personal connection to the guest, they're every bit as likely, if not more so, to go buy the book than if they find the conversation about the book, which they have not read and have no line into. If that conversation is compelling, then they're likely to go get the book too. But it's just hard to listen. For a listener, I think it's less interesting to hear two people talk about a book that I haven't read yet than it is to have two people talk, two guys talking about their shared issues with anxiety. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally. I can't, I understand probably about 25% of any bookworm episode. And if I've read the book, that increases to 35%. So.
Right. So the point is, we just got to be ourselves. Maybe mine will be some sort of meld, but I've enjoyed the conversation. I would imagine a lot of people are going to love hearing from you. I appreciate you taking time. Yeah, we're recording this on a Saturday. Thanks for taking time out of your lovely San Francisco day. I'm sure, is it foggy today, or you got sun up there?
Sunshine, yeah, we got sunshine today. Maybe in the sunset it's foggy, but here it's good.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for talking to me. Congratulations on Modern Massacres. And best to you. Are you working on another book, or are you just chilling right now?
I am, a novel. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So.
Any hints?
It is about it's a road trip book. It's about a guy that goes on a trip with his girlfriend's family to Tennessee. So yeah, I'm really it's going to be probably one of the most fun projects I ever do, and I really am looking forward to sharing it with the world in 10 years.
All right. Well, we'll talk again in 10 years.
All right, cool, man. All right, have a good one, Brad.
Okay, folks, there we have it. That was Timothy Willis Sanders. His new story collection, Modern Massacres, is available now from Publishing Genius. You can find Timothy on the internet at neutralspaces.co/TWS. You can also follow him on Twitter at Timothy Sanders. Again, the story collection is called Modern Massacres. Go get your copy right away. The Otherppl podcast is offered freely. All episodes of this show, nearly 800 and counting, are available to you, the listener, free of charge. It's a listener-supported show. So if you like this program, if you get something from it, I hope you will consider supporting it. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. I've tried to make it a no-brainer. $1 a month over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. That's patreon.com/otherpplpod. You can throw $1 in the hat every month, $3, $5, $10, whatever you prefer. As you move up the scale, you can get gear, Otherppl t-shirt, Otherppl tote bag, sticker, book club subscription, etc. patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you would like to get your hands on a copy of my new novel, Be Brief and Tell Them Everything, you can do that wherever books are sold. It's available in trade paperback, ebook, or an audiobook edition narrated by yours truly. Again, it's called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. Available now from IG. Go get it if you so desire. If you would like to email me, the address for this show is letters@otherppl.com. The Otherppl podcast has its own official app. Not sure if you're aware of that. It's a great app. It's a great way to listen. It is free. Go get the Otherppl with Brad Listi app wherever apps are available. The show is also available on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube person and you want to watch or listen to the show on YouTube, you can do that. Just go search for it by name, Otherppl with Brad Listi, and then hit subscribe when you get to the channel. It's free. If you would like to rate and review this podcast, I would appreciate that. It helps. So wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever, go drop a rating and a review. It'll take a couple of minutes and it will really help the cause. Otherwise, next week on the program, I have as my guest coming up, Luke Danny Blue. It's our book club author for the month of September. Great talk with them, and I'm excited to share that one with you. So stay tuned. Thank you for listening. I hope you're doing well, and I will return shortly.